No, I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of
you're not in
inmates.
the weeds.
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate.
This may look like a heated exchange over infamous files, but it's actually a test of whether oversight still works when public trust is already fractured. What's really being tested here is the boundary between transparency and control. Who gets to define the record and who can dodge accountability behind process and paperwork. This raises broader questions about institutional credibility in an era where agencies promise openness, while Congress struggles to get straight answers. In this video, we'll break down how this hearing turns into a fight over power, responsibility, and what transparency actually means.
John, let me move on to the Epstein Files. You said you're the most transparent FBI director in history, so I'm going to put you to the test. In 2024, you were asked by Glenn Beck about Epstein's Black Book. And you said, he asked, who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And you said, Black Book, FBI. And he said, but who? That is, I mean theirs. And you said, oh, that's under the direct control of the director of the FBI. That's what you said. Was that true, Mr. Patel?
I'll rely on you quoting it accurately. I did that a couple of years ago.
Was it true what you represented to Mr. Beck and the president's supporters out there, or were you lying? Was it true that the Black Book, Epstein's Black Book, was in the possession of the FBI director?
The Black Book was in the possession of the FBI.
Okay, so now that you're the FBI director, you have possession of the Black Book, right?
That index has been released.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book?
What is known as Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book has been released by us.
And you released it. And let me follow up on Senator Kennedy's question, because he asked you, and I'll be very precise here. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself? And you said, himself, there's no credible information, none. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And Kennedy, the information we have, again, is limited. And Senator Kennedy said, the answer is no one. And you said, for the information we have. So is it your testimony today that in all the Epstein files, that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked no one to anyone but himself? Is that your testimony, Mr.
I never said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic anyone else.
Did he traffic any young woman to someone other than himself? That was Mr. Kennedy's question.
And I said the information that 3 administrations have had access to have made determinations that there are no investigative leads that were credible to prosecute and investigate any others. I'm specifically stating
whether it's your testimony today.
You just read it, and I said it 10 minutes ago, so let the record reflect my testimony.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because there are victims like Virginia Guifer who have testified otherwise, who have said otherwise, and you're telling the American people today that the Epstein list is a single name and it's Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we're to believe?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, and you can say whatever you want.
Let me ask you this. When Todd Blanche went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, she said, but did I think these guys were coming for that? I really don't. If you met Epstein, there's no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, and some are in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers, and you know would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find out. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. And the next question Todd Blanche, the president's former criminal defense lawyer, asked is not who in the cabinet, who are you referring to? His question is, so when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage? So let me ask you, who are those cabinet members that Ghislaine Maxwell was referring to that were part of this cast of characters associated with Mr. Epstein? Who are they?
The Deputy Attorney General took the aggressive step that no one else did and interviewed Ms. Maxwell for 2 days, and we released the entirety of that transcript. I do not have that transcript in front of me. You're picking it piecemeal. The American public can read the entirety of that.
One last question, because you clearly won't tell us the cabinet members associated with Mr. Epstein. Let me ask you one last question. And that is, right after she gives this testimony in front of an FBI agent, among others, she's transferred to a minimum security prison not suitable for a sex offender like herself. Who made that decision and why?
The Bureau of Prisons.
The Bureau of Decisions made it
Prisons.
The Bureau of Prisons decided on their own, without any consultation with Blanche or anyone else, that they were going to suddenly, after this interview, completely unrelated to this interview, completely unrelated to anything she said, move her to a prison not suitable for a sex offender. You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No, I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of
you're not
inmates.
in the weeds?
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate, in January 6th. You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you continue to lie from your perch and put on a show so you can go raise money for your charade. You are a political buffoon at best.
Well, you can take an internet troll.
Take it to the bank that the FBI is protecting this country and the state and citizens of California. We are bringing historic reform. Point of order. But all you care about is a child sex predator that was prosecuted by a prior administration, and the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department did squat. And what did President Trump do? Bring new charges courageously. And what have we done?
Chairman,
you said I'm the most transparent
situation.
FBI director in history. 33,000 pages of information to you. I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
Both of you be quiet.
What we just witnessed was not a routine exchange of questions and answers. It was a collision between two competing versions of reality, sparked by one explosive moment. The FBI director being asked point blank to account for what he once said about Epstein's so-called black book, and then being pressed to reconcile that statement with what the public has been told ever since. The tension rose not because of what was said, but because of what was not. When Representative Schiff read Patel's own past words back to him and demanded clarity, the hearing stopped being procedural and became something far more consequential, a test of whether power can still be forced to explain itself. In that moment, the room was no longer just a hearing chamber. It became a courtroom of public conscience. Schiff wasn't merely asking about documents or transcripts. He was asking whether the nation's most powerful law enforcement institution could be trusted to tell the truth about one of the most disturbing cases in modern history. Patel, for his part, didn't simply answer. He deflected, reframed, and eventually erupted, transforming a question about accountability into a full-scale attack on the questioner's integrity. And that transformation is where the deeper meaning lies. At first, the exchange was technical. Patel acknowledged that the Epstein Black Book had once been in the possession of the FBI. He confirmed that it had been released. But when pressed on whether the files indicated involvement by anyone beyond Epstein himself, the answers became carefully hedged. The public was told that 3 administrations had reviewed the material and found no credible investigative leads. That phrase, credible investigative leads, is not just legal language. It is a gate. It is how institutions decide what becomes truth and what remains permanently unproven. But Schiff's question went further. He wasn't asking what had been prosecuted. He was asking what was known. And when he referenced testimony from people who said otherwise, the space between official record and lived experience opened wide. That gap is where public trust goes to die. Then came the moment that changed everything. Schiff cited a portion of the Maxwell interview transcript. The part where she spoke of a cast of characters, including individuals who had reached the highest levels of government. Schiff asked the simplest question imaginable. Who were they? Not an accusation, not a verdict, just a name. And there were no names. Instead, there was a procedural shield. Patel pointed to the release of the transcript and told the public to read it themselves. But in a democracy, transparency is not just about dumping information into the void. It is about answering direct questions when elected representatives ask them. When someone in power refuses to do that, it creates a vacuum. And in politics, vacuums never stay empty. They fill with suspicion. Schiff then raised the issue of Maxwell's transfer to a different facility shortly after her interview. Again, the question was straightforward. Who made the decision and why? The answer came back cold and bureaucratic. The Bureau of Prisons. No consultation, no connection, nothing to see here. That was the moment when the hearing crossed a line. Because what followed was not an explanation, it was an explosion. Patel didn't just defend his agency, he attacked Schiff personally. He accused him of being a fraud. He invoked past controversies. He accused him of lying. He framed the entire exchange as a political performance designed to raise money and generate attention. And in doing so, he revealed something far more important than any document ever could. When institutions feel secure, they explain. When they feel threatened, they lash out. This was not the voice of a man calmly confident in the clarity of the record. This was the voice of someone trying to seize control of the narrative before it slipped away. Patel didn't deny the complexity of the case. He didn't walk the public through what the files contain and what they don't. He went straight for moral warfare, attempting to discredit the questioner rather than satisfy the question. That is a familiar pattern in American political life. When power is questioned, it often responds by attacking the messenger. It reframes oversight as sabotage. It turns accountability into hostility. And in doing so, it quietly trains the public to stop asking. But the American system was not built to operate on silence. Congress exists to ask uncomfortable questions. Law enforcement exists to answer them. And when those roles collide, the friction is not a bug. It is the feature. It is how a free society prevents any one institution from becoming untouchable. What makes this moment so unsettling is not just the subject matter. It is the spectacle of authority refusing to be transparent while insisting that it is. Patel repeatedly called himself the most transparent FBI director in history. He pointed to thousands of pages released. But transparency is not measured in page counts. It is measured in whether the truth becomes clearer or more obscured. And after that exchange, the truth did not feel clearer. It felt heavier because the public now knows that there are transcripts, that there are interviews, that there are names implied but not spoken. And they also know that when those names were requested in the most public forum available, they were not provided. That leaves Americans with a choice. They can accept that institutions have spoken and move on, or they can recognize that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires pressure. It requires persistence. It requires citizens who are willing to sit through uncomfortable hearings and demand answers, even when the people in charge don't want to give them. This is not about personalities. It is not about Schiff or Patel as individuals. It is about a system that is being tested under the glare of public scrutiny. It is about whether power still feels obligated to explain itself to the people who grant it legitimacy. And that is why this moment matters. Because somewhere between the questions that were asked and the answers that were not given, a line was drawn. On one side stands the promise of transparency. On the other stands the reality of political survival. Which side wins depends on what happens next. If this exchange fades into the noise of the news cycle, then nothing changes. But if viewers, voters, and citizens understand what they just witnessed, a rare, raw confrontation between oversight and authority, then the story is far from over. The truth does not vanish just because someone raises their voice. It waits. And it waits for those willing to keep asking. This is Liberty Report USA. If you believe sunlight still matters, if you believe accountability is not optional, and if you believe the American people deserve more than scripted answers and personal attacks, then stand with us. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to expose the truth. To